a non-profit promoting safe, responsible, and equitable technologies in India, and listed among 100 Brilliant Women in AI Ethics TM 2024 by Women in AI Ethics New York. Please give them all a big round of applause, and with that, it's over to you, Nidhi.
Thank you, Justin. Good morning, everyone. How are you feeling? How was the event yesterday? Made the most of all the sessions? I'm so glad that all of you have joined in for this important conversation here with our esteemed panelists, who all bring a lot of years of experience in research, in actual application of the work, for products, for services that all of us experience as end users, right? So I just want to set a bit of context to what this discussion is about. I'm sure some of you are at least familiar with the instance where women's resumes were rejected because the machine that was selecting the resumes was trained on resumes that were successful in the past because they were males. So I'm not going to focus a lot on that. But now we are also coming across instances of how, let's say, you have a performance review happening in your organization, and the HR officer is using an LLM to generate performance reviews based on the exact same work that a woman or a non-binary person versus a male is doing. And the LLM gives outputs based on everything else remaining the same except the gender. The LLM gives outputs on how the male candidate is more performance and results driven, efficient, and more likely to succeed, versus the words used for women is they are more cooperative, they are more friendly, they are more pleasing. You don't realize how these biases end up influencing how jobs are given and how performance is reviewed, right? And which is why it is more pertinent than ever to have human-in-the-loop AI systems as we develop them in our organizations. Cathy O'Neil, who is a mathematician, data scientist, and author of Weapons of Math Destruction, has said how we can propagate bias and discrimination without actually intending to do so, purely because of our trust in algorithms. So without much ado, let me just ask the panelists, and let me start with Dipanita here, to set context on how do biases get encoded into automation system. How does that happen? Is it an intentional process? And how does then that affect the trustworthiness of our AI systems? Dipanita, would you start?
Hi, good morning. Am I audible? Yes, yes. So I really, Nidhi, first of all, I really like the example what you gave, Cathy O'Neil. Yeah, I read that book. Okay, now coming to the question. So the biases, if we all know what are the AI development life cycle, broadly you can categorize in 3 sections where the biases will come. So before with the pre-processing, like where we all handle with the data. So in the data, in the pre-processing stage, there will be historical and representation bias. I'll just give an example. So maybe while I was doing my PhD in the ISC Bangalore, the female to male ratio in the whole EECS department, electrical engineering and computer science, it was less than 20%. So it is a true representation of the population. But again, when we are designing system, we have to be extra cautious so that these historical themes does not come to the decision making of the systems. Now, second is the algorithmic bias, or the middle of our whole AI development life cycle. So where this algorithm comes, and due to maybe the lack of the knowledge or the unfair things, our objective function will not be proper. So you have to take care, like whether we have designed our objective function clearly to take care of individual and group fairness, etc. And the last stage, when after development of the model, whether we are measuring the performance of the machines, it is not only performance oriented, but also fairness oriented. Like, again I say, there should not be any measurement bias. So these 3 categories we can think of, all the biases. And like, just an example as I gave, so the historical and representation bias, which is there in the society, maybe due to the gender or due to some ethnicity. Okay. Yes, that should not impact the decision of the AI/ML things. So when I was working, I just came to know recently a paper where the translation was not proper. Like when it was doing from Turkish to English languages where the pronouns does not have gender, it was assigning gender as an occupation. Like doctor is much more oriented to he and nurse is much more oriented to she. So yes, in all of the cases, we have to take care of our biases. Maybe it is human or maybe the machines.
Thank you, Dipanita. I'll ask Karthik then, since we understand that these biases can affect the trustworthiness, how do human-in-the-loop systems counteract or mitigate these biases?
Thanks, Nidhi. That's a very pertinent question, isn't it? As it is, even without AI, a lot of systems perform poorly, right? Let's say you have 100 customers in a business. How many get a good experience? 95, 99? It's never 100%. Yeah. Now with AI, what happens is a lot more decisions and interactions with the customers become ever more automated. What that then means is the edge cases or the tragedy of the long tail, right? The long tail of customers facing bad customer experience just keeps on increasing. Yeah. And this is where you need to have some safeguards, keep track of how your customers feel, and if it's a system serving your colleagues or employees, then keep tab of what they feel, right? And at every step of the way, whether it's inception or through the progress or on a continual basis, look at what is missing and keep course correcting. It could be adding the right biases or the right counterbalances to the bias in the data, or it could be educating the people on how to pick the right input data and tune it for the right outcome. Are you optimizing for profit or optimizing for customer delight? All those things.
Thank you, Karthik. Soumya, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, of course. So these are very important, and that's an excellent question in terms of how do we balance, right? How do we have human in the loop counteract the biases? So I'd like to share or augment to what Dipanvita and Karthik had said with some examples. So I had the privilege of working at LinkedIn, both on job recommendations and search. So to your example that you were citing, right? In terms of how people are, your performance reviews and the HR is looking at LLM generated output. It's a classic example of job recommendations where we want our systems to be unbiased. You don't want to submit a resume and have different treatments just because of, say, different characteristics like nationality or religion or gender or whatever it may be, right? You want it to be very particular about the skill set. And that's what you want to ensure. So the bias can creep in from data, the bias can creep in from algorithms, and what we should do is understand where it is critical and how users are experiencing the product. And that criticality matters. If it is very lightweight, then you introduce feedback in the system where users should be enabled enough as consumers of the AI product to give feedback. And how, as an AI developer, people enable that consumption of feedback. The second is, how do you have guardrails in as an interface and make a human sit between the AI system and the experience to the end user? For example, I also worked to combat hate speech on social media. So you cannot have AI as an automated system there to fully power taking down hate speech or detecting hate speech because it's so nuanced of a problem. There, these systems become very critical where humans need to be in the loop until AI comes to a stage where all the guardrails and metrics that folks have defined are met.
Thanks, Soumya. That's such a poignant thing. I want everybody to just pause and think, what does that mean when Soumya mentioned hate speech is a nuanced thing. Similarly, what we understand of culture, what is right and wrong, is all very context specific, right? So often, I'm sure all of you would have heard these statements like technology is just a tool. It depends on how we use it. The results would be good or bad based on how we use it, right? I'm sure some of us agree, but just think a little deeper and try to understand when you, as let's say, when women, and these are all real life examples, when women are searching for abortion related information, for whatever reasons, if culturally the government in power or the corporates that are running the platforms have a certain rule associated with that being wrong, then the information about your searches can be provided to other systems or other decision-making entities in the system who can then influence what you see, what you learn, what you think is right or wrong. What you think is just information search can become political very quickly, right? So those are the kind of things that falls upon the organizations that are managing these nuanced conversations.
Yeah, just to add to that, so the way AI is progressing, it's inevitable that AI will be a part of most of the experiences that we have and we are exposed to. Now, two paradigms are emerging. One is something that is truly powered by AI as a decision maker. The other is AI as an assister. So we need to understand which role and for which problem statements AI is needed. Where is AI capable enough and deterministic enough that it can be used as a decision maker? Whereas, where is AI going to be assisting humans in decision making and just optimizing on time and other metrics and not be the key decision maker?
Valid point. So I'm just going to come back and now specifically ask what each of them who have worked with national and international organizations have seen or done in their organizations to make sure that these biases can be mitigated. Karthik, would you please start on how things work at your end and what your understanding of these processes have been in governance specifically?
See, first of all, when you start with AI, you need to have a good policy framework. Yeah, like you said, right? It's not just technology for the sake of technology. This is about serving people, and of course, politics gets intermingled at times. There are always conflicts there. So what that means is you need a framework or a policy to say, okay, what are the do's and don'ts, and take the organization along, right? It's very easy to put the policy, but will a team of 300 people, 3,000 people, 30,000 people follow that? Not really, right? So you need to keep talking about the right things, showcasing the right examples, and keep fixing the gaps which leads to the wrong examples. Yeah, so we have a few examples. For example, when we tried automating prices in Tesco, we found that the algorithm was recommending slightly higher prices for milk and other essential food, but that meant the bottom 10% of the customers couldn't afford it, right? So we actually put mitigation saying, okay, you know what? Don't optimize these categories. Let's just go for the lowest price possible where we don't lose money. That's it. We don't want profits, but we want to serve the customers, right? That was a deliberate call we took. As part of that process, we also identified when we sell beer, you can't go for a profit. Yeah. Because customers who love beer, they also want the cheapest price, but obviously they buy other products which are profitable. So two extremes. Yeah. On one end, you have children and kids, mothers, elders who consume milk and bread. Other end, you have adults mostly who consume alcohol. We actually had to put an exception so that the ML algorithms does the right thing for the customers, right? So you have to be cognizant. You can't go for profit.
Beer and milk, did you think they would be weighed in the same way when we're deciding the algorithm's optimization? Fantastic insight. And the last thing that he mentioned about, sometimes you have to take a back step on the decisions of profit because what is right and what is wrong is important. Dipannita, I'm just going to come to a nuanced question to you, but just before that, Soumya, would you, from your experience working with international platforms and enterprise to working in startups, what are exactly the governance systems that are being put in place and what are the challenges to doing that?
Yeah, that's very interesting because international organizations and bigger corporations, right, it's very good to see the way they're leading in ensuring that there is verticals around governance, trust, and good investment. And it's all coming not just from bottoms up, but top down. So all across, there's education internally, there are teams being formed, there's red teaming you would hear about, there is governance, trust, AI, everything that you would think about is, hey, how do we, and what becomes paramount is the experience that they want to give to the end user, right, the customers. And customers are also increasingly becoming a bit more educated. And these companies are also taking that initiative to educate their customers around, hey, this is what we're offering, not just the product, but the trust that comes with it. We're using your data properly. We are, this is the AI part of it versus this is when human comes in the loop, right? So that education comes with it. With startups, it's a bit chaotic because they're playing around with, and ecosystem that's still evolving around regulations, around compliance, which may not be very clear at the upfront. And sometimes they are the game changers in bringing new products around which regulations are still not formed. So it's imperative that leaders become more and more mindful of these things, because if not done right at the start, with the evolving ecosystem, your startup has more risk than bigger corporations, right? It's easier for bigger corporations just to spin up and mitigate some of these things versus a startup. So that's where our mindset is, that as we develop AI algorithms or we build products that are powered by AI, how do we ensure that trust and governance are first-class citizens and not an afterthought? Because the after effects of not having done it are much more serious. And that's the intent which we want to drill down the way when we develop.
Thanks, Soumya. So, Dipanita, your follow-up thoughts to these two. And then I want you to very honestly tell me, I know you're working with an organization, a larger, rather big organization, but when does human-in-the-loop oversight becomes performative and not substantive? Because a lot of times, a lot of these processes are also set in just for the optics of things, right? Just so that we're doing everything right. But when does that line get crossed? And what happens when the power to make these decisions are concentrated in the hands of a few? Does that reinforce power imbalances?
Yeah, thanks, Nidhi. This is a very insightful question. So the first part, performative rather than super sensitive. So the things is that it can happen whenever human in the loops. If my machine learning systems is very opaque or not transparent enough, then it will not be possible for a human being to come to know the thought process or the steps why the machine come to the decision making. The second thing came in the automation bias. Sometimes we may be so much confident or overgeneralization is there that my model is giving proper prediction. So humans are relaxing or maybe more trusting on the AI/ML. So in all of these cases, yes, this can happen. And your second question, like for the human in loop, for the selective one, maybe then again the bias things come. Yes, the bias things can come because if the model or algorithm is designed or developed by the people who are coming from the very sophisticated background, not from every marginalized or from very different part of the society, then in the design process, these things will not be considered. So for this, we have to make a diverse team so that people from different background represent that. And other than that, we can make the democratize the AI literacy. So the open source make people more literate about the AI, making more open source platform, or just giving some session or something. So these are the things I think we have to take care.
Thanks, Dipanita. Diversity of teams, diversity of data. Two very important things, and diversity of opinion, right? And I want to mention that although we might have focused on a lot of examples that are related to gender, there are also all kinds of biases. You know, there is a reason why when South Asian men with beards travel abroad to Western countries, they're often picked out of immigration lines because they are attributed a certain set of features which are similar to criminal, people who are likely to commit crimes according to a certain facial recognition bias. And mind you, these biases that have crept in purely because these were technologies that were built and served in Western countries, the law enforcement in those countries have decided to not go ahead with it because the information is not accurate. So those things are getting shipped to countries like India. So all those biases and baggages come to our countries, and unless we have the systems that Dipanita and Karthik and Soumya have spoken about in terms of governance, we're going to go through the same loop again. Now, I want to come to the aspect of trust. You know, a lot of companies these days are creating chatbots with human personas. So you have your Bhagya in Namma Metro, you have Usha in some bank, you have Malar AI as a teacher, you have so many AI companions even performing as boyfriends and girlfriends for youngsters. So this is what is usually referred to as the anthropomorphization of technology. What happens when people are not able to differentiate between an AI persona, and an actual person. We're seeing a lot of fallouts now, but I want to understand this a little deeper. Dipanita, do you have any thoughts on what happens to trust when this happens?
Yes, this is actually nowadays very serious concerns, I think, because most of the people, we spend a lot of time in our social media platforms. And I just remember, so this is called the Elijah effect, so where the line of trust are getting blurred, and it has very negative detrimental effect to the society. Like, I think everyone has watched the movie Hard. So what can it happen? Okay. Now coming to some real life example, I can say that I see now young generation are much more in the mobile network or social media platform rather than talking to the person next to, sitting to next. I think compared to our generation, our older generation are much more better in person conversation. So I think, again, there are some research actually going on that if AI chatbots are coming as a companion, so what will happen to the human-to-human interaction? Like, you are increasing human-to-computer interaction, but what social impact it will do to human-to-human interaction? The recent paper I was reading, this 2023 paper by Google. So yes, it needs to be handled properly. So again, the human-centered design maybe will take place in this, so that when we are designing the system, not only the user, but also the social and other aspect we are, different stakeholders we are considering.
Thank you. Karthik, how do you ensure that trust is not compromised at the organizations that you work?
I echo similar sentiments to Dipanita, right? To earn trust, the first thing you need to have is that customer obsession or focus, yeah? Or colleague, right? If you're serving colleagues using some application. Particularly for the bots, I think I actually love the bots, and I see people using the bots more than ever. See, 10 years ago, how many of you here would have used a bot? Very less, right? But today, almost all of us engage with bots. And it does 90% really well, right? Without having to wait for a human to be ready. Yeah, a human agent is not needed. You just go in, select the right option, it answers, fantastic. But in the remaining 10% or 5% where it doesn't work, let's say you can't book your metro ticket and the train's approaching and you miss the train, and let's say it's the last train for the day. Are you happy with it? Or you have ordered something on Swiggy or Zomato or something and you're complaining, but the right options don't show up for your scenario. By the way, this happened with my wife yesterday. She ordered for something like 500 rupees, and it automatically gave a discount because the order didn't show up, but the refund was 350 rupees, right? 150 rupees just vanished, and she was trying to talk to a human, but there was no way the application had enabled my wife to talk to a human. So what I would say is, wherever it works well, that's great. But when the customer is still unhappy, provide them a way to talk to a human being, right? Or some sort of escape hatch mechanism. Currently, I think most companies optimize for the happy path, but whenever it ends in a bad state, the customer is left in the lurch. Yeah, I think that's where we need to focus on and provide some alternative methods, maybe a human in the loop.
Thank you, Karthik. That is one aspect that is referred to as recourse or redressal systems in governance when it comes to having an ethical AI framework within organizations. So what happens when you hear that your loan has been rejected? What happens when you find out your child has been denied admission to a college? Do you assume that your child is not fit to go to that college? No. You should have a mechanism to inquire, and that's the redressal or a grievance mechanism. Soumya, would you add to that?
Yeah, of course. Great points brought about by Dipanvita, Karthikeyan, and Nidhi. So, how many of you have used ChatGPT? Right. It's inevitable. We have to use it for efficiency, right? The world is going, these are for efficiency. So it's about knowing upfront that I am using or I'm exposed to an AI agent or something that's involving AI, right? Versus also companies to provide for that control when a user can switch between an AI or a human. So a classic example is a complaint redressal or customer care chatbots, right? Which all companies are optimizing and using AI for as a first interface to the users, right, to solve for the basic queries. And then when it's not able to solve for it, it quickly shifts control to the actual human agent who can understand the context. So that transparency is key. Second is, where does it matter? For healthcare, sometimes it might take me an hour just because the nurse at the front desk is busy just to take my blood pressure and heart rate, right? I would want an AI system to come in and optimize that for me. But then when it comes to actually checking me and giving that human interface of understanding what my problem is, and it becomes more profound even in mental health, right? So you don't want complete AI-driven systems over there. You want that human touch, and you want the control with the user. You don't want your control with the company that I will drive the way you want. So the good part is that the experience is moving more, customer is moving towards more of an experiential thing. Optimize where it's possible, but give me the human and the trust where it's needed.
Yeah, just to add, it should not be the human in the loop, it should be the machine in the loop and human charging in charge, yeah.
I wanted to actually add to that. Human in the loop, when you might also hear in the organization, it might have to do with the post facto aspects of something, of an output, right? So typically RLHF, reinforcement learning, is something that's attributed as human in the loop. That's not the only human in the loop. We're talking about the entire AI life cycle where human has to be in the loop, because things can go wrong at all planning, development, deployment, and monitoring stages. So that's how you improvise the iteration of your product as well when you have human in the loop. One thing about transparency, Dipanita, that you mentioned, can you elaborate a bit more on how organizational transparency can be achieved? Because organizations mostly do not want to reveal all the processes of how things happen. So why is it necessary that the public or the government should know how the organization is operating or deciding the algorithms? And what is it about transparency that is so important?
Yes, transparency is a major thing. And actually, it is the key pillar of the trustworthiness. Because till the time I do not know what algorithm or what data source and who are the users, so the trust will not be built up. So here, there are some pillars to make the system more trustworthy or transparent. So it should be explainable, like any technology, not only AML, any technology should be ethical, fair, and robust. So these are not just a concept, but these need to be implemented across the organization. And above all, there should be some governance inside the organization, or maybe some government agencies, policy-making agencies like NASCOM or other, who will enforce the industries to make the system much more transparent and ethical. Yeah, I think.
Thank you. There is a NASCOM responsible RI framework that's available for any organization that wants to adopt AI governance in a proactive way. Karthik, you spoke about one thing as to why do we use AI tools, like using chatbots, using machines, because automation systems are essentially about making our lives easier, right? So why is it that we end up using AI? Because we also hear that it's better than attributing to human error or chances of human biases. When a machine is taking the decision, it's more accurate. It has shown to be more accurate in terms of its decisions. Now, that's one point where we also have to remember that when we trust a machine for its accuracy, we tend to drop our critical thinking guard. Because we tend to think that, okay, the machine is doing it, so it will be accurate. But when it's a human, we hold the human accountable. Because we somehow think that, I'm not sure if you're right, why do you think you're saying this? So we tend to hold them accountable. So what is that danger or risk of that 5% error that machines can commit without any accountability?
Yeah, it could be 5%, it could be catastrophic as well, by the way, right? 100% of the time, you never know. I think Soumya and Dipandita touched upon this, right? When you look at the life cycle of how you serve your customers using technology, the data could be corrupt. The way you are manipulating and creating the model could go wrong, yeah? And the way you actually then infer from it, what if that's wrong? Yeah, there are so many moving parts in there, right? And sometimes you have terabytes of data in there. All it takes is just a few wrong examples or corrupt examples for it to go wrong. And we have seen such cases. Yeah, when you ask ChatGPT some controversial question about some national leader in India or anywhere for that matter, it says something really crazy, and You can actually game it also because all you needed to do is, put a few public blocks which ChatGPT or other such, LLMs feed on all the time, right? Scrape all the time. I think the mitigation is some of the things that Deepanita and Soumya mentioned, right? Have safeguards at every step of the way. Test thoroughly, right? Don't roll it out to all the customers. Test it internally. Do A/B tests. Look for feedback. Don't just blindly trust and go for, go from 0 to 100% automation. If you do that, you're digging a hole for yourself, and the competitors who do better and who go a bit more methodically, they will win in the long run.
Test, test, test. Make sure that at every stage there is a learning process to improve, right? In the interest of time, I want to come to one slightly personal question. Have you experienced bias in any of the personal instances or professional instances as such? Soumya, you can start.
Bias because of AI?
How
But-
personally you have come across bias, and have you seen that
Yeah.
transforming into AI systems?
Yeah. So there are hundreds of instances, right? And one that cut very close recently was related to outcomes related to. So when I became a new mom a few years back, I was looking for clothing online to buy, right? And when I would search for T-shirts for a girl, so I have a daughter, it would only give results with like Cutie Pie and Little Miss Sunshine and things like that. And I was really adamant to get things like Space, Champion, and all of these results. And I really had to search for boys' T-shirts. So to get there. And that really frustrated me that I am working on recommendation systems myself. The problem may be different, but why am I as a consumer not able to get the result that I want, which is equitable? So that's the bias that infuriated me. I'm still working on a data set to see how to evaluate how LLMs are working on it, but that's an open problem for everybody, right? These are systems that are built on the human bias that has been in existence. We will buy what we are exposed to. We will buy from that. So it doesn't come to our mind that let me go to that section to actually not buy from this section. So it's a feedback loop. It's a vicious cycle that continues where what you're exposed to, you will just choose. So your universe gets limited. How do we open that universe is the key here.
Deepanita.
Yes, hi. So yes, I experienced personally a lot of bias case maybe in my life. Actually, my father is the first graduate. I am the first engineer in my whole family, maybe the whole village. So you come to know when I came to college, even though all my friends' parents are from engineering or from the doctor's background, and apart from these societal taboo, I was the male is to female ratio again, means we are the 5 and total out of 60 male students. So I came from the electrical engineering background from IIST Shibpur. So after my BTech, when I came to PhD for the IISc Bangalore, there also this female to male ratio is very less than 20%. So then I just got interested and I searched. Then I saw that this occupation is very much related to men and women things. Because when you come to the high-paying job or the very skill-set job like surgeon or something, female representation is less than 20%. But when it is like beautician or interior designer, female representation 80%. So this representation bias is very much concerning. But because you can understand, any machine learning algorithm is getting trained based on those data. And if not taken care properly, its decision-making process is definitely going to be biased towards some gender or towards some race or some ethnicity. So except my personal experience, there are so many blogs and articles actually, and it has very detrimental effect to the society, how extent the bias can go. So I think recent violences in Manipur, I think all people know, where content moderation was not doing properly. So what extent it has led to. Yes, so.
Thank you. Karthik.
Yeah, see, regarding biases and the whole AI thing, I think taking a step back, I would like to take a step back and provide a slightly contrarian view, yeah, if I may. I think AI is rapidly improving, but is it really AI a good intelligence can actually ask questions, but today AI can't, right? It can answer only questions. A good intelligent person can actually say whether they know an answer for sure or are they making some assumptions or guesses. AI still isn't there, right? It's getting there, it's not still not there though. So I think my steer would be keep using it, but I think Soumya made a very interesting point, I think, to one of the earlier questions, right? In some of the use cases, it's okay to make a mistake, yeah? The harm is very limited, right? But let's say you're rejecting a loan or a school application, or Google Maps actually routes you, through a river, not realizing there is no road, and you can lose life, yeah? So in those cases, you have to be super careful and have the right mitigations and safeguards every step of the way, yeah? If you want to go aggressive as a company, and let's say even one customer suffers, that's just not the right thing, right? The reputation, the branding takes a hit, and a competitor who's working on a more robust model but going slightly slower, they are going to win in the long run. So my caution would be use it in the right places, let the research keep moving ahead, but let's not be reckless.
Thank you, Karthik. Very important point. First of all, focusing the research on the right direction, the right use cases, and the need where AI needs to be applied. A lot of times we are applying AI to everything like it is one garnishing on one dish, right? The important thing is to understand whether or not AI needs to be used. So I often say this one line, you don't need a chainsaw to cut a cake. So why use AI is something that we need to question in our systems as such. And of course, being able to differentiate the harms and risks that come from specific use cases. If it's a financial product, then the risks are higher. Healthcare risks are higher. Elsewhere, the risks may be lower. In the interest of time, I want each of the panelists to say that one word in your mind that you think is strongest driving towards an ethical AI approach, a human-in-the-loop approach that stands or resonates strongly with you. Soumya?
To me, it will be integrity, because that is something that's core to humans, right? Which everything runs by. In professional setting, in personal setting, integrity is what matters, and each of us strive to building it, and it takes years to build. So that's something that's key, which the world is still struggling to quantify that and put it into AI systems.
I think we humans are biased rather than the machine. So we have to maybe think, sit back, and rethink again. Because it's very easy to debias the algorithm, but it's difficult to debias our own human kind.
Yeah, you said one word, they both took a couple of sentences. I'll try it in a phrase, cautious optimism.
Excellent. Thank you for the wonderful panelists who have shared all the insights that they could in this limited time. And thank you for this audience who has gathered here to keenly listen. We are around if you want to ask questions. So the time is blaring red at us saying it's up. So please feel free to ask the questions to panelists and all. We are around. And thank you for being here. Have a good rest of the day.
Please give them a big round of applause. I'd like to request Megha Upadhyaya, the session chair, to please come forward and present our speakers with a small token of our appreciation.